Hello and welcome to Women's Biz Podcast. I'm Annie Gibbins, founder and CEO of Women's Biz Global, and I invite you to get comfortable and listen in on candid conversations I have with fascinating women from around the globe. Business leaders, entrepreneurs, humanitarians, athletes, and a whole lot of regular people. Tune in as they let their guard down and open up on aspects of their business and life journey, how they measure success, and what they have learned along the way. These conversations aim to inspire you to embrace opportunities and possibilities beyond the limits of your imagination. Reclaim your power, strength, and vulnerability. Stand in your truth and propel yourself towards the life you dream to live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our wonderful listeners. It's Annie here from Women's Biz Podcast, and I'm super excited to have you here today. And also joining us from Carolina is Morgan McCarver, whose life you'll find took a profound turn through scoliosis spinal fusion surgery. Oh my goodness, there's nothing like something just stopping us in our tracks to give us these aha moments. This experience led her to ceramics, deepened her faith, and inspired her to run a successful pottery business. We certainly haven't had that on Women's Biz Podcast before. She's also the author of God the Artist. So I'd love you to join us today, listening in as we explore her inspiring journey, intersecting art and faith, and I'm sure a lot of other things as well. So welcome to the program, Morgan.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, and what a warm welcome. I'm happy to be here.
It's lovely to have you on the show, and I'd love to just dive into it. Would you be able to share with us all that transformative moment during your scoliosis spinal fusion surgery that I mentioned that led you to really realizing you did have a passion for ceramics?
Of course. So I've always been looking for a creative outlet. I was really involved with competitive dancing at the time, growing up. All throughout, my younger years, I was dancing, and I had such a community there, and it's a great way to express yourself through dance. But like you said, I had scoliosis spinal fusion surgery at about age 14. I was in 8th grade. And I had known that I had scoliosis for about 3 years at the time. I had been diagnosed earlier, and I had been wearing back braces to try to correct my curve, or at least hold it in place. And it really wasn't staying where it needed to. The doctors were checking up, and it seemed to be progressing and only getting worse. And it was going to start affecting my organs. And so for those who aren't familiar with scoliosis, basically my spine wasn't growing straight. It was growing in an S curve, and there were actually 3 different curves throughout my back that were varying in degrees and getting worse and twisting as they were curving. And so the doctors decided that at that point, I had stopped growing, so that wasn't going to be an issue, and I needed to go ahead and have the surgery. And it really just stopped me in my tracks. Like you were saying, it was a year-long recovery process. I have 2 titanium rods and about 18 screws holding my spine straight. I actually gained about 1.5 inches in height because that curvy spine straightened out. But the recovery meant no dance for that year. And that was really hard because that was my friend group, that was my hobby, and that was really just taken away from me. And I knew I couldn't do it for at least a year. And when I went back, I did end up going back to dance after that year, but it never really was the same. Of course, my body had changed, and there were new dance steps that I didn't know, and my friends had graduated or moved on. So I was really looking for a creative outlet that was besides dance at this point, especially during my recovery process. And that's when my mom just signed me up for a kids camp, just a ceramics summer camp. And it was really a pivotal moment in my life. It really changed the trajectory of my life, and the creative outlet that I found was pottery at that point. And I loved the freedom, the malleability of the clay. It's so flexible and so bendable. And so I was able to kind of live vicariously through the clay, if you will. I was able to push the limits of the clay in ways that I no longer physically could, with my own body and stretching and everything. And it was just a really freeing process. And through that, I really just fell in love with it. That one class wasn't enough. I just kept signing up for more and more classes, and eventually decided to go to college to get a degree in ceramics. And then from there, I've worked in various different ceramics fields. I've worked for a ceramic supply store as like help desk, troubleshooting, answering phones, answering kiln questions for people. I've taught private lessons and private classes. I've worked for a potter as an apprentice in a way, a studio manager. And like you said, now I am in a studio. I have my own studio space that I rent in a community group kind of setting. And so I'm constantly surrounded by other ceramicists, and I'm able to get that community in the ceramics world and bounce ideas off of each other and see what everybody's doing. And it's just such a great experience.
Wow, what a journey. And how wonderful that you're obviously very creative, very expressive as a dancer, but to have such a huge turn of events happen at such a foundational time of your teenage years. I mean, that is huge. I'm just thinking back at that sort of age where your hormones are going crazy, your friendships are everything. You're going in one space of thinking, maybe even become a dancer or use that as, in part of your, future, and to be able to channel it in that way. Thank goodness for your mom, by the way. Shout out to who tap into their child and go, hey, just try something. And I love that passion of, one's not enough, and when you find something that just really lights you up and you want to explore it more and more. I also love it, that journey when it then becomes your business, and we'll get on to that you did end up trying all those different parts of the business, which is actually great, because so many people kind of do something a little bit and then start a business and they don't know all the components, whereas actually, because you've done it so young, you've then gone and taken on those foundational roles, if you like, and so you get a really nice sort of perspective of the industry of your own business. So tapping into that area, then you then did ceramics at university. Amazing journey. So you've really dove in deep. You've absolutely loved it. You've had those sorts of part-time roles, different parts of the industry, and then you've created your own business, Morgan McCarver Porcelain. So what was the biggest challenge and joy of running your own business?
That's a great question. I think a lot of it, like you're saying, is not knowing what I don't know. And so that can stem from many different facets, anything from figuring out how to submit sales and use tax per state, because I sell in multiple different states. And so learning about getting the appropriate forms filled out and, crunching those numbers at the end of the month or the quarter or whatever it needs, because each state in the US has different tax things that need to be done. So that has been a struggle, but just learning that there's so many things I don't know. So like you said, I went to a university for it. I went to the South Carolina School of the Arts. It's Anderson University in South Carolina. And they have a great program there. And I learned so much. And, of course, you're graduating college, you think you know it all. And then I land this job working retail for one of the biggest companies shipping nationwide in the US for ceramic supplies. And I learned everything I didn't know, right? So everything from how to fire a kiln, how to take it apart, put it back together, how to troubleshoot electric kilns. That's what you fire the clay in. And that's really similar to working on a car in a way. Like you can replace certain parts and troubleshoot different things. And so that was a whole learning experience there, getting caught up in learning all of those types of things that I didn't know before, and learning different glaze techniques and recipes and things like that. Ceramics can be very scientific, and it involves a lot of chemistry as well. So learning those things that I didn't necessarily fully develop in my college days. And then I thought, okay, for sure, I've got everything down. And then I went to work for a potter in another state And I ended up moving to that state actually. But learning how to run a small business is completely different than running a ceramic supply store. And really working with her and learning how to update my website, how to make it user friendly, the best way to sell things, the best way to display a booth, all of those little things along the way. It's, the things that you don't know even exist. So you don't even know how to prepare for them or learn about them. Those can be the things that get you down the road. So I'm constantly learning, constantly asking questions. And that has ended up bringing about some of the greatest joys in this experience. I'm always applying for things that I know just enough about that I'm really willing to take the risk, but I don't know too much about them that I scare myself off. So I'll apply to exhibitions or different like art festivals, things like that, that seem like a stretch. And I just apply because I'm getting my work in front of some amazing jurors who are masters in the field and who know what they're doing. And every time I get my work out there and have that visibility, then you never know what that might lead to. Sometimes I get accepted. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes it leads a completely different path. And sometimes little things lead to bigger things. And so that's really just been like the joy of this whole experience, just taking the risks and seeing kind of where I end up along the way.
What a journey, and what a great realization. And for those listening in, I think you'll agree, many of us, when we do degrees, qualifications, you think, surely I've done this qualification, I come out feeling invincible, I know everything. And then it's such a reality check when you then start applying it in different contexts and realizing how much you don't know. It really is just the beginning. So that principle of lifelong learning, seriously, needs to be in all of us for life, but particularly those of us who go into business. And then also your journey to then realize that it's so different in different contexts, different stores. What a journey it is, but how great it is to have those experiences. And I'm sure you'll agree with me, Morgan, that, those experiences are so wonderful, because when you then start your own business, you then got more depth. You can understand how it works in different contexts, whereas sometimes if you just go from A to B, you don't realize, what it would be like to have a store or do something in a different environment. And I think those learning curves for you, did you learn it yourself, as in go online, do business courses, or have you done it more experientially or with mentors and just asking people along the way?
A little bit of both. I actually have a minor in business. I have a double minor in art history and business. And that was my parents' decision, which I am so grateful and thankful for. They've supported me from the very beginning, telling me to take that pottery class. They don't always understand it. They don't understand the late nights I put in. But they've been great and supporting me in that way. But they did say, okay, if you're going to major in art, you've got to have something to fall back on. And so I do have a minor in business. So I have that side, the academic side, if you will, of business courses. And that's really helped me, especially in marketing, learning to have that eye for what sells, what the buyer is looking for, things like that. But then also I really learned a lot just being in the field and getting that hands-on experience, that firsthand learning just how to do a show. And you really don't know until you do a show what you need to do for the next show. So it's constantly building on each other. And, I got comfortable in my home state. And then from there, I started doing shows in other states. And so that opens up, like I mentioned before, different forms, different taxes, different little like registration type things to fill out. So you have like a tax ID number, and everything just builds on itself, which is really, really cool, because you feel like you're kind of like climbing a ladder in that way. Like, okay, I've handled this. I understand enough about this that I can take on something else. And a lot of it's just trying and seeing what works, or like I said, having a community is really nice, asking what worked for them and going from there. And Reading reviews is also great, especially like for setting up websites, seeing what other artists are using, if they're happy with it, and then going from there.
There's so much analytics involved. And I love your approach to, start where you are and then go to another state, another state. It's amazing how many in one country, you're in the US, how different the different rules, regulations, the way of operating can be in different states. And some people don't realize that. Also, then you've got the physical sales and shows and maybe galleries or all sorts of opportunities for you as an artist. But then you've also got online. Do you sell your product online as well as in a physical store? Is it mainly online? Have you had to balance that, and have you approached it in a really analytical way from what the industry, what your buyers are wanting? How have you gone about that?
That's a great question. I do a little bit of everything. I've kind of learned for my business approach, I enjoy having my hand in a bunch of different types of baskets. So I have work in galleries between the Carolinas and Tennessee. So I'm selling in physical locations. I'm in about 9 locations now where I drop off my work. They either take commission or I pay to rent a space in their gallery. And I'm getting those checks every quarter or every month. But then I also do festivals, so like weekend type shows or residencies. There's a week-long residency in Blowing Rock, North Carolina that's about 2 hours from me. And so I'll do that sometimes, or I do that about once a year. And it's a really great experience. It's a great like tourist town where people will come in and shop. And it's a great 1 week type thing. So it's kind of, it's high stakes for that week, but it's not something I have to continue to uphold throughout the year, which is really nice. And then I also do sell online. So I have an Etsy shop and I have a wholesale shop on Faire, which Faire is a relatively new website, but it's great for wholesale accounts. So different businesses across the country or internationally can shop my store and buy wholesale. And that's a cheaper price for them. And then I'll ship that out in bulk and then they can resell it. And that way I'm able to get into different states that I might not be able to drive to or willing to fly to for a show because pottery is so heavy. There's really no point in flying to a show. But that way I can get my work in places like California, which is the complete opposite coast from me, and make more sales that way and get my product seen and get more business cards out and more people viewing my pieces. And so I kind of do a little bit of all of 3 of those. And then also a market that isn't always thought of is I do juried exhibitions. And so that's kind of like an art gallery space that's usually set up for a certain amount of time. It could be a week, it could be a month, it could be 6 months. But it's a curated gallery that's been curated by a specific elected juror who's looking at your pieces and deciding, sometimes it's a national show or a regional show, sometimes it's local, and they're deciding what pieces they want in this show. And it's another great way to kind of elevate my work and get that in front of people and also make some sales. And again, I can ship those pieces to other states. And since it's part of a group collective show, I'm not trying to fill a gallery with only my pots. I'm able to sell or ship my best pieces that have been selected, and they've got some prestige now because they've been nationally selected for this exhibition. And then I'm able to get them to different states that way too. So that's a market that not everybody thinks about, but it's a really great experience and it can lead to some really amazing things as well. It's definitely a resume booster. And the more shows you're in, the more you'll be eligible for solo exhibitions or other bigger shows. They can help get into different markets as well. So I try to stay well-rounded in that way, just because I'm not like some TikTok star where something has just blown up in one specific area. So that way I have other areas to kind of supplement as I go along.
Yeah, which I think is a really great tactic to have, actually, not put all your eggs in one basket, just to be mixing it around. And as you said, some of them are very time intensive, pressured, that you really want to go in and out over a week or two. It's not sustainable to be able to be at that pace and that environment long term. You've also got costs, because you've got pottery that one, I'm assuming it has to be wrapped really well because you're not wanting breakages. Plus, it can get heavy. So there's so many aspects of your business that I'm sure are just such a learning curve for you. What has been the biggest challenge for you to overcome so far?
One of them has been just hauling my pots around, because I am a one-woman show. I'm doing this by myself. And so, especially with my back, I really have a weight limit. I can't really lift over 50 pounds. I just know that about myself.
Yeah.
And so I have to be careful how I pack things because, I see a box and I just want to fill it. But if I can't lift it, then that's no good. So really taking care of my body as well as working on pottery. That's a balance that I have to work on daily, weekly, just because of my circumstances and because of the physical nature of pottery. Even sitting at a wheel, there's a certain posture and you're holding yourself in a certain way. And it can be very tiring for your muscles, just lifting clay bags and lifting finished pots, bending over to load a kiln. And so that's something I've had to learn. I have ended up switching over to plastic tubs just because I did a show in the rain one year with cardboard boxes and all of my boxes melted.
Oh.
So I learned that one the hard way, but I'm switching over to plastic tubs and I determine the size based on the type of piece. So like I have a special shape for all of my mugs and I know how many mugs will fit in that box and how heavy that box is and whether or not I can carry it. So just finding ways to adjust and adapt as I need to. It can be one of the hardest parts. I feel like there's always something to adapt to, but it's also a nice puzzle and I love figuring things out. So it makes it fun as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Once those cardboard boxes get wet, you'll never use them again.
No, and they smell so bad.
That is so hilarious. I love what you mentioned before too of the collective, this sense. Originally, earlier in our interview, you mentioned that you work in a sort of a cooperative sort of space, which is really great. You've got creatives there together, but you also get to know each other and complement each other, and I'm assuming work with each other at different times. And then when you also go into these shows and galleries and opportunities, you're also partnering up with other people. And as you mentioned, it's a great resume booster. It's also wonderful for those connections. You just never know who you're going to be put alongside, and you never know where those opportunities will then come from. So it's kind of exciting. You must feel like you're always on this, you never know. You're just on the cusp of getting discovered by someone or, having that branding by association. I'm a big lover of that whole concept that if you're next, you might only have a few products, but you're next to someone else who's got a real following. It can be so valuable. So how have you approached that? And are you acutely aware of the opportunity that lies within being associated with other people who are possibly further ahead on their journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. Festivals are really fun in that way because I really get to become friends with my booth neighbors. And so I've made some really amazing friends. And then show season here is usually fall, winter, kind of aligning with Christmas and the holidays. And so we'll be making, I won't really see them in the spring and summer. We're busy making our pieces. And then come fall, we'll be beside each other, or they'll, have a different booth down the row, but I'll know them and I'll remember them and get to catch up with them. And so that can be a really fun community. Of course, you see them on Instagram or wherever, social media. But just knowing a friendly face at a festival, it can be so much fun. And like you were saying, making connections. Even this past season, I did a show. And the show itself, it was a good show, but it wasn't what it could have been. But there were people walking around they were actually in charge of another show several weeks later, and they were looking for vendors. Several people had canceled. And so they were really reaching out to us, saying, hey, we really need you to come fill our space so it looks like a good show. Are you willing? And so that led to one of my best shows of the season. And so it's constantly networking where you don't even know it's going to be a network. Like I thought those were just customers coming by and admiring my pieces, but they were really scouting out some artists who they thought would be a good fit for their show. And so it's constantly things like that. Even the 701 Center for Contemporary Art that happened 2020, like right around the pandemic. It kind of ended up overlapping the pandemic, unfortunately, but we were still able to have the exhibition. And that was something I just took a risk and applied for. And it's a show, it was specifically for those artists living in South Carolina at the time, which I was. And it was relatively prestigious, and I had no idea. But I thought, I could do what they're asking me to do. And the prize seemed really cool. It was like a residency opportunity. And so I applied for that. And I made it in the top 3, which meant I got to exhibit some of my artwork in the space with the other 2 artists in the top 3. And so that was a really amazing experience. It was in the heart of, it was actually in the capital of South Carolina. It was in Columbia. And just being able to take my work and show in the Capitol, that was really amazing. And I did not win, but I was the youngest to make it that far. And I thought, that was a great run. I wish I would have won, but that's okay. But because I had done that, I had pictures of me being able to fill a gallery space and pictures of my work in a gallery setting. And that actually led to the artist residency in Blowing Rock, that I've mentioned I've done for the past 2 years. And so you never know what kind of networking you can do, even amongst people who like aren't potters, other artists or other gallery owners or other things that you think this isn't going to go anywhere. And just, because I had those pictures and I had some connections of different things for different events, I was able to get into like that show that I wouldn't have gotten into if I hadn't had done the previous show, or I was able to get into that residency that I wouldn't have been able to if I didn't do the first finalist type thing. So there's different elements like that are just constantly, it's such a web, and it's amazing how many artists are just willing to help you and give you advice along the way, which I think makes it a really beautiful community in that way.
Absolutely. And congratulations to you. I think that's absolutely incredible what you've achieved at a young age. And I just love your attitude of, give it a go, you never know, and that's right. Coming third, it's like, oh, disappointed. We all want to win, like anyone who's competitive wants to be the best. And it's your desire to get there. But also by being third, one, you're in that space, you've had those advantages. Plus you also get very close proximity and observations of, well, why did that person come second and why did that person come first? And so there's so much learning in that opportunity when you embrace it, rather than go, oh, well, I didn't win. It's like, no, but you were in a position which was a golden opportunity to really take you to that next level. So congratulations to you for doing that. I also want to talk about your book. You wrote a book called God the Artist, which has got such a captivating title. What inspired you to write it, and how does the theme of faith intertwine with your experiences that you're having?
So all of this started about the time I was graduating in 2019. Anderson is a Christian university, and so my professors were good about incorporating our faith with our work. And I was really looking for a book to read. There's so many Bible verses about pottery that I was really looking for a book to kind of culminate all of these verses and give that ceramics Christian standpoint. And I couldn't really find what I was looking for. And so at that point, the Holy Spirit had just put it on my heart that I could start working on something like that. I could start compiling those verses. And I had never read through the Bible all the way through. And so I began that in 2019, and I got an archaeological study Bible. It's the it's the ESV version of the archaeological study Bible. And it just gives such like cultural references and other things, pictures that really help me understand what's going on. And I really just started delving deep into that and picking those pottery Bible verses out and interpreting them from my ceramics background and my background as a Christian. And I began taking notes, and that's really how the book started to become what it is. I tried to get it published in 2019, and there was one publisher who was willing to take a chance on it, but they ended up saying I would need to like have a ghostwriter and pay a lot of money and self-publish, and I didn't fully understand what they were even talking about. But pretty much they were saying that the manuscript was not where it needed to be, and I needed to have someone come in and get it to a point that it could be readable. And so I prayed a lot about it, and I just felt the Holy Spirit at the time saying I needed to put that on hold. I needed to wait for more experience. And so in that time, that's when I went to work for the ceramic supply company. And after a couple of years, I went to work for the potter as an apprentice. And so I got all that experience that I didn't even know I needed, like we were talking about earlier. And then this past January, the Holy Spirit really said, you need to revisit that. And so I started revisiting it. I wrote it in about 2.5 weeks. I started reaching out to publishers then. One publisher got back to me, and the representative there, Terry Wallen, he said, this could be good, but it needs to be longer. He said it needed to be about 1/3 longer for the word count. And so it took me about 1.5 weeks, but I pretty much doubled the word count to get it where he wanted it to be. And I sent that off and applied. Again, I applied, and I just gave it to God. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen because of him. And it did. And I was so happy to get that acceptance letter this past April. And it's just been a crazy experience. Again, I'm learning so many things that I didn't know. Everything from how to market a book, how to publish a book, how to be a host on a podcast, all these things that I've never done. Now I'm doing them, and it's just a crazy experience, and I'm loving every minute of it.
What have you learned most about yourself then in that journey? Like, you've got those times that you do it, you think you've got it right, and then someone else tells you, it's not up to this grade, but then suddenly you've got this new opportunity later on, and then you can do something in a week and make a massive change happen. Do you know what I mean? It's crazy sometimes. For you, has it all been mindset? Has it actually just been you needed to know what was required? What was the biggest growth opportunity for you?
That's a great question. It depends, I think, on the situation. Speaking about the book specifically, I really didn't know a word count for a book. And so I just kind of had no idea. And the first manuscript, I admit it was pretty bad. And I think that was a lot of things kind of culminating together. I hadn't fully come full circle, able to look back at my scoliosis experience and see the good that had come of it, and see that that was the moment that really led me on the path of ceramics. And that took a while. That took over 10 years for me to be able to get to that point, because before that, I didn't really want to talk about it. And so the first manuscript didn't really talk about my experience and how I discovered pottery. And that's such a blessing that the Lord had given me to be able to understand pottery from a Christian standpoint. Without the scoliosis experience, I might not have ever picked up clay in the first place. And of course, that needed to be an element of the book. And so some of that was just me growing in a way to be able to accept what happened, and to be able to come full circle and see, yes, I'm not as flexible as I was. And yes, there's going to be things that I'll never be able to do again. And whatever it is, I'll probably, always struggle with body image to some certain degree. And there's things that I'll always work on. But I'm able to look back and see, if that moment had not happened in my life, then my story wouldn't be what it is. And I'm just so thankful and grateful that the Lord had given me that specific story, and honored that he's allowing me to share that story in that way, because he could have given it to anybody. And so now I'm feeling almost a sense of catching up. I haven't shared this in so long, and my story can help so many other people. And it's amazing how many people know someone with scoliosis or have had back problems themselves, and being able to connect in that way that I haven't even tried to connect with fellow humanity for 10 years. I really feel like now that's what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be sharing my story. And so I think all of that kind of culminated in January, and through different circumstances. I had a lot of free time, and it was cold, so I was inside anyway. And it really just started to flow. And I think that's another thing about art as well. Everything's in a cycle. And especially with ceramics, you have to make it and then fire it and then glaze it and then fire it again. And I love that cycle. And I think that's the same, especially with my writing process. I need that cycle of working or resting or revisiting and coming back. And I don't want to do the same mundane thing every day. I'll get so bored. But the cycle is really what kind of refreshes me and keeps me going.
Mm. Oh my goodness. I'm just imagining the listeners listening to this story and resonating with your growth experience of realizing that you need to be in the story. And what I mean by that is, I'm a publisher myself and an author, and often we get so stuck in writing the information, what people need to know. And it's the research for you. It's that research into the Bible, research into your craft, what you're trying to share. And then that classic moment of someone going, you know what's missing in this book? You. And it's like, oh, how much of me should I share? Is that really of value? Whereas actually that's like the huge part. It's how your journey, your story has put all those bits together and why it's meaningful and why it's powerful to the listener. The same as those listening in today would be listening to your journey going, oh, it's really interesting to hear Morgan, and to find out why it's been powerful for you. So I'm so thankful that you did have that learning opportunity and you got there in the end, because now it's just the beginning of that next chapter. And what I've heard in this conversation today is just so many learnings and evolutions of who you are becoming as a woman, as an artist, as a businesswoman, to be able to constantly be assessing and modifying what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you've got other opportunities to grow. And I think that's one of the biggest tips for our listeners to have listening in on this podcast. So thank you so much for being on the program today. It's been a really fantastic journey into the world of pottery and health, self-care, real awakenings with a business model. I think it's been a really fantastic conversation, and I'm really thankful that you've shared with us so openly today, Morgan.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This has been just such a great time. I've enjoyed every minute of it.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Women's Biz Podcast. I'm Annie Gibbins, founder and CEO of Women's Biz Global. And if you would like to fast track your future success, pop on over to womensbizglobal.com, where you can find out how our coaching, media and publishing opportunities are helping women just like you to become and be seen as the trusted authorities in their niche. Inquire today and start reining in the abundance you desire.